Welcome to the basics video where I will go over the basics of the phone that the average person will care about. This video is for the Motorola Moto Z2 Force. Feel free to check out my specs video for a more detailed explanation of the phone. This Motorola made Moto Z2 Force has two 12 megapixel back cameras along with a 5 megapixel front camera. Overall, the pictures are amazing regardless if it's day or night. The images come out clear, but sometimes they could look a little dark. This is just something that I noticed, but you can be the judge of this. This camera is capable of 4K video at 30 frames per second, which is great, but again, I wasn't too impressed with the 1080p recording. Again, you can be the judge of this. Something amazing is that this phone has a laser autofocus, which I believe is the best focusing method out there. Unfortunately, none of these cameras have optical image stabilization, which may be a bad thing for some people. However, it does make sense because the sensors are very close to each other, but the original Moto Z Force had optical image stabilization, so it is a little bit of a disappointment. Overall, I will give these cameras an 8.5 out of 10. Back in the day, Motorola ruled the phone market, but once Android came out, they started to lose momentum. I believe that this was because of Moto Blur, which was filled with a lot of bloat and made the phone super slow. Fast forward to now, and Motorola learned that simple is the right way. They kept stock Android and added a few of their features, making the phone fast and useful. The Moto display is nice because it acts like the always-on display, just without the battery drain. There are a few gestures in this phone that makes the phone fast and efficient, so you can check the phone and get back to reality. With this said, there are some weird ones in here, but you can easily turn them off if you don't need them. The phone also gives you the option to control your phone with a fingerprint scanner. Yes, I decided to leave that off, but I can see how some people would love this, especially people that love phones like the Palm Pre. I received Android 8.0 Oreo on this phone before my Samsung S8 Plus did, which I think is pretty awesome. For me, the software is solid and fast, so it gets a 9 out of 10. As for the battery, it's actually really good. This phone has a 2730 mAh cell, which is crazy given that the first Moto Z Force had a 3500 mAh cell. More on that later. I was pretty surprised by how long this battery lasted because the cell is the size of a small Android device but in a large body. With this said, the battery life was better than most phones that I've been using over the last year. After 14 hours and 44 minutes of usage, my phone was left with 70%, and 1 hour and 17 minutes of that was screen on time. Another day I got 13 hours of usage with 47% remaining, and 2 hours and 3 minutes of that was screen on time. Another day I got 14.5 hours of usage out of this battery with 17% remaining, and 3 hours and 29 minutes of that was screen on time. All of these figures are with the brightness all the way up. The phone seemed to outperform my S9 Plus, which had a much larger battery. I'm not sure what Motorola did to make this battery this good, but I believe that it is amazing. It would have been crazy if Motorola decided to put the Moto Z Force 3500 mAh cell back into this phone. Overall, the battery category receives an amazing 9 out of 10. Speaking of the Moto Z Force, that will be the phone that we will be comparing the Moto Z2 Force to. The Moto Z2 Force is about the same size, but it is noticeably thinner, but still not as crazy thin as the original Moto Z. The camera sticks out like it normally does, but there are now two sensors rather than one. Sadly, optical image stabilization was removed from the Moto Z2 Force. Another sad part is that the sensors are dual 12 megapixel cameras, while the Moto Z Force had a 21 megapixel sensor. The front camera stayed pretty much the same, but now has a dual LED flash unit instead of a single unit. There is now one microphone on the front instead of having two, and the fingerprint scanner is rounded rather than being a square. The back is now all metal rather than having the two strips of protected pieces of glass on the top and the bottom. As expected, the MotoMod pins are here to stay. Nice to see that they introduce it and keep it going. LG. The processor and the GPU were upgraded, moving from a Snapdragon 820 processor to the Snapdragon 835. The battery size has decreased by an astonishing 770 milliamps. I mean, other than slimming down the phone, there really was no reason to do this. With this said, the battery life is awesome, but I do wish that they kept the larger battery. Lastly, there are minor additions like Bluetooth 5.0. Oddly enough, this was turned on when Android Oreo was released, which is strange but beneficial. Overall, I would say that the Moto Z2 Force is a solid upgrade, so this category gets an 8.25 out of 10. Durability? Sure, the phone is made out of metal, but the screen is literally shatterproof. In theory, it is still possible to break, and if Motorola won't fix it for you, you might be out of luck. I've looked everywhere, and the only place that I can find the screen is on Mobile Defenders for $275 for the part. It will probably cost about $320 to $350 for a third party to replace it for you. The camera lens will run you roughly $35 to fix or $7 to do it yourself. It does break, which I find is pretty surprising. The charging port can be replaced but will not be easy to replace because it's soldered in. I would assume that repair places will charge somewhere between $80 to $160. I would also assume that the battery would need to be replaced at some point, but I can't find the part anywhere. It seems like these parts are very difficult to find and may go up in price over time when they do become available. I mean, the idea behind this phone is that you don't need to fix it. Overall, I would say that the Moto Z2 Force gets a 7.5 out of 10 for durability and repair cost. Now, should you buy this phone? With a score of 84.5%, I believe that this is one of the best phones that I've ever used. This phone is simple to use and missing all the bad gimmicks that other phones have. Sure, the Moto mods are somewhat expensive, but the phone isn't. I do wish that this phone had wireless charging built in, but it makes sense why it doesn't. I hope that you learned something from these videos, but now I want to learn something from you. Do you think that it's time for Motorola to make a comeback? Let me know in the comment section or on Twitter at MattofRWR, and feel free to follow me on the social media listed above. Also, subscribe to my channel so you can watch more videos like this. Every sub helps. Thanks for watching.